Guys, we just got done thanking the fans. And once again, thank you everyone for listening. I know I've said it about a million times. So let's get to the big point that we've all been waiting for. Who was the MVP for the Hawks? Now, I lost Garrick and Dave. They had important things to do, like have a life. So I brought in the man. He needs no introduction. He's the writer, editor, knows everything Hawks related, at least my go-to guy. I brought in Chris Willis. Chris, what is happening, man?
Hey, Josh. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good. Doing good. Sad the season's over with, but I am excited that pretty much everyone on the staff, still willing to talk about it. So let's get into the MVP. Who would you think the MVP of this season's Atlanta Hawks?
Oh man, it's a great question. And I'm sure there's some interesting answers out there. But for me, I mean, there's only really one candidate, and it's Paul Millsap. Going away, I thought he was probably the most consistent guy from day one. I thought he carried the team at times. Even when he wasn't scoring, he was he was making impact on the defensive end. I think that's where it gets lost. I mean, whether this guy needed to rebound the basketball, if whatever the Hawks needed him to do, he found a way to do it. And even in that playoff series against the Celtics, he couldn't make a shot. But he's blocking shots. He's stealing the basketball. I mean, he was the anchor on the defensive end of the floor. So, I thought, he signed a big contract. I think there was a little bit of pressure on, but he even took his game to another level. So, I mean, he's easily my MVP for the Hawks this season.
Well, I hate to say that, there's no wrong answer, no right answer, but there's only one right answer, and you kind of named it right there. Garrick was speaking earlier. He was saying he wanted to put Paul Millsap for like every category winner. He wanted to put him as Defensive Player of the Year, which he did win that. And he wanted to put him as Most Improved just because he was just amazed, especially if you consider the rest of the forwards in the East. He just had the best all-around game, arguably best power forward in the East this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, he's right there. I mean, it's interesting. He kind of operates in some obscurity a little bit where, the rest of the league doesn't notice him. Part of that's playing in Atlanta, and part of that's just the Hawks' equal opportunity offense. You don't get those scoring explosions that make headlines. Like very often from an Atlanta team, like what we saw Millsap do against the Celtics when I think it was 45 points. So, that really makes headlines. But it takes the smart guys, guys like Zach Lowe, people like that writing about Millsap to really, kind of get his name out there. But I think a lot of people just overlook him. They think he's the same guy that he was in Utah. And that was a great player, but he's really expanded his game. And, I think also, when you talk about defensive player, I think Al Horford's kind of underrated as well. Al even had a better defensive rating on the team than Millsap did at times. But when we talk about the Hawks and you see this number 2 defensive rating, and then nobody on this team gets talked about as being a defensive stopper. If you mention the Hawks and mention defense, somebody's going to bring up the true center argument. There's no rim protection, but the thing they're missing, Al Horford and Paul Millsap actually do a pretty good job of that. And and that's the thing. That's the thing that kind of gets lost. You could in when you're just staring at the numbers and not really watching a lot of the games.
True center. Is that some sort of argument amongst Hawks fans, Chris?
We've heard it a time or two over the last 4 or 5 years, I'm sure.
Yeah. One of the great things about Millsap and really Horford too, they seem that they are so versatile that it seems that they can defend just about any position. We saw that in the Boston series when Atlanta wasn't afraid to switch those guys on to Isaiah Thomas if he had the ball and let them, deal with them. And We also saw that, the Hawks were allowed to go small with my guy I mentioned I turned around on with Mike Scott, but we saw the Mike Scott Millsap line up there a few times. Well, multiple times. That's one of the rotations we see. And because of, I guess, Millsap's defensive versatility and everything else he provides, at least for me, it turned my head and made me raise my eyebrow and say, oh, this guy has something.
Oh,
But
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
and I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was done. I was just basically speaking random words and
No,
trying
you're
to
you're
figure
you're
how to
exactly.
finish.
I agree with you. Now I mean we've seen this with Al Horford for a long time. I mean I can remember when I was first starting to cover and write about the team, watching the Hawks and the Suns when Steve Nash was still there, and it was a one possession ball game, and Mike Woodson was still. No, Larry Drew was the coach actually, and they switched him on. Al switches on to Steve Nash, and I mean the question comes after the game. I think Nash ended up making the shot, but the question after the game is why he switched there, and he's like, well, Al Horford's the best, the best defender I have on this team. It doesn't matter who he's playing, and and I think Millsap's along that same lines. I think their versatility is what really gave the Hawks defense its bite. They can switch guys, they can guard wings, they do a good job of attacking the pick and roll. And I think that's a huge part of any good successful defense in the NBA now. That's we talked about Walter Tavares some this week, and I think that's one of the biggest is yes, he can protect the rim. There's no doubt about it. 7'3", great timing. But he's got to be able to be able to step out on these pick and rolls, because that's all teams are going to do to him. They're going to basket, and I think that's one of the big things that Al Horford and Paul Millsap do so well. And I think Millsap does it. I think it's out there about Horford. I think a lot of people understand that, but I don't think people really understand how good defensively Millsap's been and how versatile he is.
Yeah, definitely. And this is the MVP category, guys, again. And so we're going to spend some time on this, talking about Millsap. Chris, you mentioned him signing the contract earlier in the year, which to me was kind of a big thing, that he said no to another team and wanted to come play again in Atlanta, which is, I don't know, it doesn't come across often, at least in my short memory, following the team. It was surprising. And amongst the contract, he played with the pressure. Like, he took on the pressure and elevated his game even more. One thing I think that also doesn't get looked at with Paul Millsap is, we talk about his shooting ability. And when people talk Atlanta, they, think that everyone on the team has to shoot. But if you ever watch the Hawks, Millsap doesn't really take a ton of three-point shots. He does a lot of his work attacking the basket. And you're going to love this. I said months ago, while watching Millsap, he's everything we wish that we could have gotten with the former number 5 power forward, in a sense that he will not stop, I guess, going to the basket, finding creative ways to score near the basket if things don't go for him. Which,
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I think you're dead on it. I mean, but I even felt like he passed up some 3-point shots this year. I thought, I don't think he shot 3-point shot as well this season as he did last year. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but I thought I read that, he fell a percentage point or two. He didn't look quite as confident all the time shooting that shot as much. If he could figure out how to get a call at the rim,
oh,
that's it. That's the secret. I mean, he can go from all-star to elite very easily by getting 3 or 4 more free throw attempts a game. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think he recognizes. I mean, he's not a high volume guy. He doesn't have to have the ball every night. Teams are going to take him away, and that's kind of the way Atlanta's offense works. when Paul's not going, defense is taking him away, then, it opens up something for somebody else in theory. So, I really like the pick and pop with him, that he can roll to the basket as well. If you want to nitpick his game, I mean, it's the finishing at the rim sometimes, and I think he's still really, really good. But when you watch all 82 games, the ones that stick are the ones where he doesn't get the foul call, or he doesn't flush the dunk home, when he over a smaller defender when he probably should. But I think that's nitpicking, because I think we watch every shot he takes. So, I think he's just underrated all the way around. But you're right. I mean, his mentality. I mean, when he's in Utah, he lived in the paint. He didn't come out of the paint, so we know he can be successful down there. So yeah, I agree with you. I mean, over a guy like Josh Smith. I mean, all the talent in the world, but standing in what we were trying to accomplish a lot of times. I think Millsap's pretty well in tune to it and does a decent enough job of making plays for his teammates, and can attack the rim.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, to me, it's admirable watching him, because, like you said, Chris, he wouldn't get the foul calls. It's, infamous on Hawks Twitter and everybody everywhere else talking about the number of times he'll get hit in the head while going to the basket. But he'll still go to the basket. He passes up, like you said, those somewhat open three-point shots. He'll pass them up, and he will still dribble his way, find his way to get to the basket. He's just everything I wish we could have had. And I'm not going to say the name, but in the more, I guess you would say, physically gifted guy we used to have, just if he had that mentality, I don't know, it would have been great. And that's what I like Paul Millsap for. Hard worker. He found a way to elevate his game. And then, there are those random games out of nowhere. He'll come up with like 15 rebounds, just staying in the paint. But let me ask you, do you think there's a chance for Millsap to make an all-NBA team this year?
Oh, well, I mean, I wouldn't be – I hadn't really looked at it. I mean, when you get into all-NBA, you're talking about both conferences. I mean, he would probably – I mean, I've seen Al Horford's name mentioned as well. I think they still do the center distinction. They may not now. Millsap would get my vote for before anybody from the Hawks. I would say probably just because of where the Hawks finished. If he does, probably third team's probably going to be the ceiling for him. But there's a lot of good, talented forwards. But as you mentioned, I mean, in the Eastern Conference, you got to really search hard to find a guy as good as Millsap. So, I don't know where you can get some fuzzy things. I mean, Paul George? I mean, I remember one year he got rode in as a guard, I think. So it gets screwy sometimes when you're trying to determine those things. But I think he's on that level. He may not be at the top of it, but I think he's definitely in the conversation.
I'm expecting, I don't know, maybe second, third team, simply like kind of how you said, how the layout goes. It'll be interesting to see how, I guess, the forwards are put. Like, you're going to have LeBron, you're going to have Durant. It's going to be interesting what they put Draymond as, to me, because he might qualify. I don't know. This is just me speaking. He might qualify as a center, because of how often that team goes small. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But like you said, before anybody else for the Hawks, I would put Millsap. But, man, that's pretty much all we can say about the MVP. Chris, do you have anything else we can say about the MVP selection?
I mean, I appreciate you. It's a great topic. I appreciate you having me on. It's just, Paul's a great story. I mean, and you look at it. I mean, here's a guy. We went into free agency. I think about that summer a lot, and just lost Josh Smith. I mean, just basically let him walk away for nothing.
Yeah.
And we were thinking about, well, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? And all of a sudden, the tweet comes across, 2-year deal, Paul Millsap, and we're like, kind of like, what? Where did that come from? And then you find out, I mean, it's a very team-friendly contract. We were celebrating those not having those full bird rights kind of worked against us in the long run. But for a guy like Millsap to bet on himself, to come in and work hard, to turn that into a near max contract, and then to come back and take his game to another level. I mean, you got to appreciate that. Because it was so often we see guys get paid and they don't return to that level, or they plateau out. So I enjoy watching Paul Millsap. So it's a great story. It's been fun watching his career evolve and him grow as a player.
Yeah. Also, he seems to me to be like a very professional off the court. I don't know if you've met him or not. I'm gonna have to talk to Jamila, but just everything that I hear about him, he's a great guy, and he's just incredibly professional, which isn't what you always get out of guys that are, I guess you would say, the best player, or especially if you're on a team with young guys. But it was just great to see him work hard when he came in here and just maintain a great attitude and everything else. So it has been a pleasure to watch him this year. All right.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's it for our MVP. We thank you guys for listening to this. We might, we might have some time for some questions and some call-ins later on. But Chris, since I have you here, let me ask you this because I couldn't get a straight answer from anybody. What was your favorite moment of the season?
Oh, well, I saw that question. It's tough, man. When you watch all of them, it's kind of tough. I saw some good answers. I thought one of my. I thought the Oklahoma City win was a good one. There was a lot of some thrilling regular season games. You tend to remember the bad ones, the bad moments, the buzzer beaters that cost you, a little more often. I guess, if you really want to go back to it, my favorite moment was finally losing, getting rid of the Celtics jinx, beating them and doing it on the road after they've tormented this franchise for so many years. I was a kid watching Dominique and Larry Bird in Game 7. I remember watching it with my ball in my hand, and I was so mad when that game ended. I didn't want it to end, and it was so good, and at the same time, it was so heartbreaking. So, that's my best moment of the season. This is not the same Celtics team. I made a pretty big deal point that out. There's no Hall of Famers on this Celtics squad, but I think as a Hawks fan, it was kind of satisfying ending their season for a change.
That was a very popular answer. Everyone just liked beating the Celtics. Because, we have that, just the years of torment. Even in my small time watching the team, especially when we first, I guess, made it to the playoffs in that 2008 season, my years prior to that being a fan hasn't been that pleasant due to the product that we've seen on the floor. But just beating Boston was great. It's great to see that everyone had different great moments through the years, through this year. I don't know if some folks are saying, I guess this year has been disappointing. It's disappointing to lose, but at the same time, it's great to see that there have been, good moments through the year and not everyone's forgetting the negative points.
Yeah, I mean it's easy. You coming off a 60-win season where you just didn't lose at all for 2 months. I mean basically, and you played lights out. You're blowing people out. But we knew at the time it was setting a bar and at an unbelievable level, and it was it was pretty clear that the Hawks weren't going to be able to sustain that. I don't know that any team could sustain that. Well, I guess Golden State did this year, but um, I mean it's a very very special thing. So I mean I guess I'm guilty too. It kind of felt like the season kind of felt a little bit like a letdown in a lot of ways, but I don't think we should cloud it because I think it was still a very good. I was listening to a podcast the other day and they talked about what's the difference in losing in the second round in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's not that much, honestly. Yes, if you haven't been to the Eastern Conference Finals many times, you can say you're in the Final Four of the NBA, you're in the top four, but the reality is, it may have had more to do with the bracket seedings. I mean, if the Hawks had finished third or fifth, they could still be playing today in a game 7. So, you just never know. I mean, it's all about matchups and stuff. So, I thought it was a good season. I don't think it was great. I think they'll tell you that. I don't think they saw their offense sliding back to the pack. But at the same time, I don't think anybody thought they would be this good defensively either. The Cavs series, it is what it is. The Hawks could have very easily won 2 of those games, maybe even 3 when you think about it. And if the Cavaliers continue to shoot the basketball that way, a lot of teams are going to have trouble with them. So,
Yeah.
You put it all together. It's a end, but I think that's what a 60-win campaign and number one overall seed kind of raises the bar and raises the expectations.
Yeah. Well, hey, but last year was fun. This year I had a good time watching the team. It was fun to see all the support going into the team this year opposed to years past. You saw the ownership, getting into the team. We talked to Steve Koonin earlier in the year, showing his love for the team. And it was just, I don't know, it was fun to watch everyone so pro Hawks. But anyway, year's over with, and we're looking forward to next year. Chris, thank you for joining me today and coming on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Josh. Appreciate you having me, man.
Hey, it's not a problem, man. We thank you. I thank you for coming on and everyone else I do this pod with. And we'll definitely have to talk during the off season with what's going to be a very interesting couple of months for the team. All right. Well, thank you.
Yes, sir, man.